Welcome back to the deep dive. Today, we're embarking on a really crucial journey into the world of cybersecurity. We're opening up Certified Information Systems Security Professional, or CISSP Chapter 2. Specifically, we're zeroing in on personnel security and risk management concepts. Our mission today, it's really to unpack how organizations don't just secure their digital assets, the computers and data, but also their most vital resource, their people. We'll explore how they comprehensively manage risks, making sure you, our listener, walk away truly informed and, frankly, ready to spot the subtle and maybe not so subtle threats out there. We've got a fantastic study guide as our source material, and we're going to break it down concept by concept, plus plenty of real-world examples to hopefully make everything click. So let's kick off by diving into personnel security policies and procedures, securing the human element. It always strikes me as a bit of a paradox, doesn't it? Humans are often seen as the weakest link in security, but, simultaneously, they're undeniably a key security asset. How do organizations truly achieve this delicate balance?
That's a fantastic starting point because you've really hit on the core challenge there. The paradox you mentioned is absolutely right. While robust security solutions, think firewalls, encryption, are critical, they're fundamentally incomplete if you don't address what we call the human factor. People can either subvert those defenses through negligence or maybe even malicious intent, or they can fortify them. The real insight here, I think, is that proper training and motivation transform individuals from potential liabilities into, well, invaluable assets. Think of it like a building's foundation. You can construct the strongest walls, the most secure roof, advanced alarm systems. But if the very foundation, the people who build and maintain it, or maybe those who are given keys to enter, is weak or compromised, the entire structure is at risk. People, when properly engaged and empowered, become the living, breathing foundation of an organization's security posture, not the problem.
That analogy makes perfect sense. So, if people are the foundation, where does that building process start? When an organization brings someone new on board, what are those foundational steps, particularly around, say, job descriptions and position descriptions?
Those are indeed the absolute foundational
Yeah.
steps. Job descriptions, or position descriptions as they're sometimes called, are far more than just HR formalities. They're fundamental security documents, really. They define specific roles and, crucially, classify positions based on the sensitivity of the information or resources an employee will handle. This classification then directly guides the assignment of access rights, permissions, and privileges. It's all about applying the principle of least privilege.
Ah, least privilege. We hear that a lot.
Exactly. It dictates that an employee should only be granted the absolute minimum necessary access to perform their required work tasks. Nothing more. The consequence of not doing this meticulously is, well, a sprawling network of unnecessary access, creating gaping security holes. It happens all the time. To use another analogy, imagine a carefully designed set of keys for a large building. A janitor gets keys to the common areas, maybe the supply closet, but they wouldn't get a key to the CEO's office or the financial vault, right?
Right, of course not.
And a department manager gets keys to their specific department, but not the entire company's confidential records. The job description defines exactly which keys you get, ensuring you only have access to what's strictly required for your tasks. And this isn't a one-time thing either. Organizations need to continuously audit these privilege assignments throughout an employee's tenure. You have to make sure that access doesn't expand beyond what's strictly required for their role as things change.
That makes a lot of sense, defining access precisely right from the get-go. But even before someone gets those keys, there's a whole process of vetting them, right? Beyond just looking at a resume, what's the due diligence involved in candidate screening and hiring?
Absolutely. The screening process needs to be incredibly thorough because you're entrusting these people with your organization's sensitive assets. It's a big deal. Employment screening involves verifying pretty much everything a candidate claims on their resume and during interviews. This includes background checks, which delve into their work history, education verification, and often criminal records and references. You have to check. For positions handling highly sensitive data or requiring a security clearance, validating that clearance is also essential, obviously. A more modern practice that has become, well, pretty standard is reviewing social networking accounts.
Really? Checking their social media?
Yes, to reveal any inappropriate materials or maybe general behavior that might indicate a lack of judgment or perhaps alignment with company values, it gives you a different picture. Beyond that, depending on the role, organizations might conduct skill challenges to verify technical abilities, drug testing for certain safety-sensitive roles, and even personality testing to assess suitability for position or team dynamics. However, it's absolutely crucial for organizations to be acutely aware of legal restrictions, especially anti-discrimination laws, when conducting any background checks.
That's a really important point.
It is. Fairness and legal defensibility are paramount, which is why a standardized interview process is also critical to ensure all candidates are evaluated equitably. Think of this whole process like carefully vetting a new member for a very exclusive, maybe secret club. You don't just take their word for it at the door. You check their past, you talk to people who know them, you make sure their skills and values align perfectly with the club's purpose before they're ever given access to anything sensitive. It's all about minimizing insider threats from the very beginning.
That's a great way to put it. It's about far more than just a quick chat and a handshake. So, okay, once a candidate has cleared all those hurdles and they're hired, what happens during the onboarding process? What are the key agreements and policy-driven requirements that integrate them into the organization's security culture?
Right, onboarding. It's essentially the reverse of offboarding in some ways. It's about seamlessly integrating new employees into the organization and, critically, into its security culture. You want them to understand the rules from day one. One of the first and most fundamental requirements is setting up their identity and access management, or IAM, system profile. This is where new employees are given their computer and network accounts, and their privileges are assigned based directly on their job role. And again, this is where the principle of least privilege is reinforced. They only receive the minimum necessary access to perform their duties, not some blanket set of permissions.
Okay, so the access part is key. What about the paperwork, the agreements?
Yes. Beyond system access, several critical policy-driven requirements come into play. There's the formal employment agreement, which is a document outlining the rules, restrictions, their job description, key security details, and importantly, the consequences for any violations. Then you have the acceptable use policy, or AUP. This policy defines what is and isn't an acceptable activity, practice, or use for company equipment and resources. It's basically the playbook for how they're expected to interact with technology. It specifies security roles, responsibilities, performance expectations, and what happens if they don't comply.
So the do's and don'ts.
Pretty much. Then another crucial document is the Non-Disclosure Agreement, or NDA. The NDA's purpose is vital, protecting confidential and trade secret information that employees will inevitably be exposed to during their work. NDAs can take various forms. A unilateral NDA where only one party discloses confidential info, a bilateral or mutual NDA where both parties share sensitive information, or even a multilateral NDA involving 3 or more parties. Violations of an NDA can carry significant penalties, so their importance is always stressed during onboarding.
And what about preventing them from taking secrets to competitors?
Yes. That's where the non-compete agreement, or NCA, also sometimes called a covenant not to compete, or CNC, comes in. These agreements restrict employees from working for competitors or starting competing businesses for a specified time and geographic area after leaving the organization. Now, their enforceability varies quite a bit by jurisdiction, so legal counsel is always advised for crafting them properly. To use our earlier analogy, onboarding is like giving a new tenant the full rules, the specific keys to their apartment, and a lease for an apartment building. The AUP is the building's rulebook, spelling out what you can and can't do with shared resources, like the laundry room or the internet. The NBA protects all the secret sauce recipes or proprietary designs kept within the walls of the building. And the NCA or CNC prevents them from immediately setting up a rival apartment building right across the street, using all the insights they gained from living in yours.
Those agreements clearly lay the groundwork. It paints a full picture. But security isn't just a one-time handshake, right? It's an ongoing process. How do organizations maintain security oversight over an employee's entire tenure beyond just those initial agreements?
That's exactly right. And that's where continuous employee oversight comes in. It's about regularly reviewing and auditing job descriptions, work tasks, privileges, and responsibilities for every staff member. Not just once a year, but ongoing. This is vital because over time, job responsibilities can drift, leading to what we call privilege creep.
Privilege creep sounds, well, creepy.
It can be. It means an employee might accumulate more access rights than they strictly need for their current tasks. Maybe they moved departments or took on temporary duties, and the old access was never revoked. This increases the risk of security violations. Excessive privileges just pose a greater chance for mistakes, or, worse, for a disgruntled employee to cause harm. To mitigate these risks, organizations employ several strategies. Mandatory vacations are a classic example, particularly in financial industries.
Mandatory vacations, how does that help security?
Well, it isn't just for employee well-being, although that's a benefit. It's a security control. When an employee takes a mandatory vacation, typically 2 consecutive weeks, a coworker, or sometimes an auditor, must perform their duties. This peer review process makes it very difficult for an employee to commit fraud or negligence covertly, because someone else will be looking closely at their work, their accounts, their transactions.
Ah, I see. Clever.
It is. Similarly, job rotation shifts responsibilities among employees periodically. This reduces the risk that a single individual can perpetrate fraud or abuse undetected over a long period. Separation of duties is another key principle. It prevents any single person from controlling all critical steps of a process. Think about initiating a payment, approving it, and sending it. You want different people doing each step.
So no one person has all the power.
Exactly. It means multiple individuals are required to complete a critical task. This drastically reduces the likelihood of a single person being able to commit a crime without detection. Cross-training ensures that multiple employees can perform the same tasks, which not only helps with business continuity if someone's out, but it also aids in fraud detection, much like job rotation. All these strategies are designed to mitigate the risk of collusion, which is when two or more people work together to commit a crime. Makes it much harder. And then there's more advanced monitoring technology like User and Entity Behavior Analytics, or UEBA. This is a sophisticated technique that analyzes user and entity behavior. Think logins, file access, network traffic for suspicious patterns that might indicate vulnerabilities, threats, or exploitation. It looks for anomalies.
So it's like an automated detective.
Kind of, yeah. It can detect abnormal activity, even if individual actions seem legitimate on their own. It sees the bigger, potentially suspicious picture. So think of employee oversight as a highly vigilant police force patrolling a city. They regularly check areas, make sure no single officer has too much power, rotate beats to prevent corruption or hidden wrongdoing. UEBA is like a high-tech surveillance system with artificial intelligence that spots abnormal traffic patterns or unusual gatherings, even if individual cars or people seem to be following the rules.
That's a really comprehensive approach to keeping an eye on things during employment. But what happens when an employee's journey with the company comes to an end? Whether through a transfer or a termination, I imagine there are significant security risks involved in offboarding.
You're absolutely right. Offboarding is just as critical as onboarding, maybe even more so from a pure security risk perspective. It's essentially the reverse process, removing an employee's identity and access from the Identity and Access Management, or IAM, system, cleanly and completely. It's important to distinguish between internal employee transfers and full terminations. Internal transfers should be handled carefully. You don't just move a problem employee from one department to another, hoping the issue magically resolves itself. That's a huge security risk waiting to happen.
Right, just shifting the problem.
Exactly. For terminations, the procedures are much more immediate and stringent. Key offboarding procedures include promptly disabling or deleting user accounts like immediately, revoking all access codes, keys, badges, smart cards. All privileges must be terminated right away. Interestingly, user accounts might be retained for a short period, maybe a few months, for auditing purposes, to track past activity if needed, but then they should be fully deleted. Physical security is also vital, informing security guards of the departure, ensuring they manage physical access, preventing re-entry without an escort. Consistency of application is key, so everything must be meticulously documented, every step. Exit interviews are also a crucial part of the process, though they're not strictly a security control in the technical sense. Their purpose is more about understanding the employee's perspective, learning from their experience, and identifying areas for organizational improvement. It's valuable feedback.
But for someone being terminated, I imagine the timing is critical.
Absolutely. For terminated employees, immediate actions are paramount to prevent incidents. This includes deactivating accounts and access at the moment of termination, not later. Collecting all company equipment like laptops, mobile devices, physically accompanying the released employee as they gather their personal belongings. Security personnel must be informed immediately not to allow re-entry without an escort. The source material emphasizes firing. Timing is everything. A well-designed and correctly followed termination process is crucial to avoid security incidents from disgruntled former employees. Common pitfalls from a botched termination include failure to return mobile devices, undeactivated network user accounts, a huge one, unblocked personal identification numbers or PINs or smart cards for building entry, or maybe unrevoked parking passes. Even leaking layoff information prematurely can create an insider threat if someone finds out before the official process begins.
Wow, lots to consider.
Definitely. Think of offboarding, especially firing, like defusing a bomb. It requires careful planning and precise execution. One wrong step, like forgetting to cut the right wire, which is like deactivating an account or revoking a key, can lead to a disastrous explosion or, in this case, a security breach. It's all about mitigating that risk.
That analogy paints a very clear picture of the potential fallout. Okay, so beyond internal employees, organizations also rely heavily on external parties like vendors, consultants, and contractors. How do they manage the security risks associated with these relationships? They often get access to internal systems and data too. That's a critical area, absolutely, because external parties introduce what we call multi-party risk. Agreements with vendors, consultants, and contractors define performance, expectations, compensation, and consequences, much like internal employment agreements. However, the risks and threats in multi-party projects can vary significantly based on different objectives, expectations, timelines, and budgets. Robust risk management is essential to identify, assess, and mitigate these varied risks coming from outside. A key tool here is the Service Level Agreement, or SLA. SLAs are formal agreements that ensure external organizations provide agreed-upon levels of service, which is absolutely crucial for business continuity.
Can you give an example of an SLA item?
Sure. An SLA might stipulate that a critical network circuit, provided by a telecom vendor, cannot be down for more than, say, 15 minutes in a month, without incurring significant financial penalties. SLAs also address financial and contractual remedies if the agreement isn't met. They provide teeth. Then there's outsourcing, which is the general term for using an external third party for specific tasks or operations. From a risk management perspective, outsourcing is essentially a transfer or assignment of risk. You're shifting some of the operational burden and the associated risk to another entity.
So you're paying someone else to take the risk.
In a way, yes, or at least manage it. To manage this effectively, many organizations use a vendor management system, or VMS. This is typically a software solution designed to manage and procure staffing services, hardware, software, and other products from external vendors. A VMS helps ensure secure communication, detailed event logging for accountability, and streamlined relationship management, enhancing vendor performance and reducing risks. Underlying all these external relationships is the fundamental concept of compliance. Compliance is simply the act of conforming or adhering to rules, policies, regulations, standards, or requirements. It's an absolutely paramount concern in security governance, ensuring that all external parties meet the same security standards expected of internal operations, or at least meet the standards defined in their contracts.
Okay, so tying it back to the analogy.
Right. To put it simply, managing vendors is like inviting contractors to work on your house. You need an ironclad contract, that's your SLA, spelling out exactly what they'll do, how long it will take, and what happens if they mess up. Outsourcing is like hiring a general contractor to manage all those subcontractors, transferring some of the headache of direct oversight. And the VMS is like a central project manager, maybe a software platform that keeps track of all the external work, invoices, communications, and performance. Ultimately, compliance is simply ensuring everyone, whether they're your employee or a contractor, follows the building codes and safety regulations for your house.
So whether it's internal staff or external partners, it really all funnels back to securing the human element and managing associated risks. That leads us perfectly into our next major topic, understanding and applying risk management concepts. Why is risk management so, fundamental to cybersecurity?
Risk management is truly the bedrock of effective cybersecurity. It's not just a thing, it's the thing in many ways. It's a detailed, ongoing process of identifying factors that could potentially cause damage or disclosure of sensitive information. It involves evaluating your valuable assets, implementing cost-effective solutions to protect them, and ultimately supporting the organization's overarching mission. Its primary goal: reduce risk to an acceptable level. And it's crucial to understand that risks aren't just computer-based, like malware attacks or hacking. They encompass a much broader spectrum. Think natural disasters like floods or earthquakes, civil unrest, power outages, and as we just discussed at length, human errors or intentional malicious actions.
So it's holistic.
Exactly. Risk management is typically composed of two primary elements. First, there's risk assessment or risk analysis. This involves a comprehensive examination of your systems, your people, your processes to identify risks, threats, their likelihood of occurring, the potential impact if they do, and any existing countermeasures you have in place. Second, there's risk response. This means evaluating those potential countermeasures, developing various response options for senior management to consider, and then implementing strategies for risk reduction or mitigation. It's a continuous cycle. Assess, respond, monitor, assess again. not a one-time event.
That makes sense that it's a continuous cycle. To truly understand it, though, we really need to speak the language. Can you break down the specific terminology of risk management for us? It can get pretty dense sometimes.
Absolutely. Getting the terms straight is key. Let's try to visualize it as a dynamic cycle, maybe like a wheel constantly turning. In this cycle, each element plays a critical role, and understanding their distinctions is really important for effective security. At the top of our imaginary wheel, you have your asset. This is anything used in a business process or task. It can be tangible, like a server or a laptop, or intangible, like intellectual property, customer data, or even company reputation. Its asset valuation, or AV, is essentially its dollar worth to the organization. This considers everything from purchase or development cost, maintenance, intellectual property value, market value, replacement cost, potential productivity loss, liability if compromised, usefulness. It's the bottom line value.
Okay, asset and its value. What threatens it?
That's the next piece. The threat. A threat is simply a potential occurrence that could cause harm to your asset. Think malware, a natural disaster, an insider action. It's the bad thing that might happen. The threat agent or threat actor is the person or system that carries out the threat, the entity that exploits a weakness. This could be an attacker, a bad guy, a piece of malware, or even an accidental human error. The threat event is the actual occurrence. A fire breaks out, a flood happens, a system fails, someone clicks a phishing link. And the threat vector is the path or means by which that threat agent gains access to the target. Think email, malicious websites, Wi-Fi networks, USB drives, social media, the delivery mechanism. Understanding these distinctions isn't just academic. It helps us predict who might target us, how, and what methods they'll use, which informs how we choose specific countermeasures.
Got it. Asset, threat agent, event, vector. What's on the other side?
On the other side of the wheel, you have a vulnerability. This is a weakness and an asset or safeguard that can be exploited by a threat. Think of a software flaw, a misconfiguration, maybe even a lack of user training. It's the hole in your defense, the opening the threat can use. If a threat successfully exploits a vulnerability, it leads to exposure. The exposure factor, or EF, is the percentage of loss your organization would experience if that specific asset were violated by that realized risk. It's the potential degree of harm, expressed as a percentage.
Okay, so the vulnerability is the weakness. Exposure is how bad it could be. What about risk itself?
Right. Combining these, risk itself is the probability or likelihood that a threat will exploit a vulnerability to cause harm, and the severity of that harm or impact. A common way to think about it, though simplified, is the formula. Risk, threat, vulnerability. It's the chance of bad things happening combined with how bad they would be if they did. To protect against these risks, you implement a safeguard or countermeasure. This is anything that removes or reduces a vulnerability or protects against one or more specific threats. Examples are everywhere. Firewalls, security policies, encryption, guards, locks, training. An attack is the intentional exploitation of a vulnerability to cause damage, loss, or disclosure. A breach is the successful intrusion or penetration that happens when a security mechanism is bypassed. And finally, a hazard is a potential source or situation that can cause harm, like a loose cable on the floor or an open server rack in an unsecured area. It's something that could lead to a threat event. So the wheel keeps turning. Assets face threats, which exploit vulnerabilities, leading to exposure and risk. Safeguards are implemented to protect assets from threats. And the cycle continues as you constantly reassess and refine your defenses based on new threats and vulnerabilities. You can see this cycle illustrated in Section 2.2 of the guide. It shows these cyclical relationships visually.
That's a great breakdown, and the wheel analogy really helps visualize how all these pieces fit together. So once you know these terms, how do you actually go about assessing or analyzing the risk? What are the different approaches organizations take?
Good question. Risk assessment is primarily the responsibility of upper management, ultimately, and it directly ties into legal and ethical concepts like due care and due diligence, essentially, acting prudently and reasonably to protect the organization's assets. There are two main methodologies for conducting risk analysis: qualitative and quantitative.
Qualitative versus quantitative, what's the difference?
Qualitative risk analysis is more scenario-based, subjective, and perception-based. It doesn't typically assign exact dollar figures to risks. Instead, it ranks risks on a relative scale. low, medium, high, or maybe 1 to 5. It's generally faster and less expensive to perform, making it ideal for quickly prioritizing a large number of risks, especially when precise financial data isn't readily available or maybe not relevant, like for reputational damage. Methods used here include brainstorming sessions with experts, storyboarding potential attack scenarios, conducting focus groups, using surveys and questionnaires, checklists, one-on-one meetings, and interviews. A particularly interesting technique used in qualitative assessment is the Delphi technique.
The Delphi technique?
Yeah.
Sounds mysterious.
It's actually pretty straightforward. It's an anonymous feedback process used to reach a consensus among a group of experts while minimizing bias from strong personalities or, groupthink. Participants provide their opinions anonymously, the feedback is compiled and shared, and then they evaluate again, often in multiple rounds, until a general consensus emerges. Think of qualitative assessment like a doctor diagnosing a patient based on symptoms in their experience. They might say, this looks like a severe case of the flu, without knowing the exact viral load count. The Delphi technique is like getting a second, third, and fourth opinion from other doctors, all done anonymously, until they generally agree on the diagnosis and severity, without anyone feeling pressured by the lead doctor.
Okay, that makes sense for getting expert consensus. What about the other side, quantitative?
Right. Quantitative risk analysis, on the other hand, employs mathematical calculations to provide concrete probability indications and, crucially, precise dollar values for risks. It focuses heavily on the financial impact and the cost-effectiveness of potential controls. While the formulas might seem a bit daunting at first, the core idea is pretty simple. Putting a dollar figure on risk allows you to make informed business decisions and justify security investments in clear financial terms. The process, often shown visually like in Figure 2.3 of the guide, typically involves these steps. First, assign an asset value, the AV we talked about. Second, calculate the exposure factor, or EF, the percentage of loss you'd experience if the risk occurs. Third, using those two, you calculate the single loss expectancy, or SLE. This is the potential monetary loss from a single realized threat event. The formula is straightforward. SLE equals AVEF.
Okay, so SLE is the cost of one incident.
Exactly. Fourth, you perform threat analysis to calculate the annualized rate of occurrence, or ARO. This is the expected frequency, how many times per year you anticipate a specific threat occurring. This might be based on historical data, industry reports, expert judgment. For example, the ARO for a major earthquake might be 0.03 once every 33 years, while the ARO for an employee clicking a phishing link might be 15.
15 times a year! Ouch!
It happens. Fifth, with the SLE and ARO, you then derive the annualized loss expectancy, or ALE. This represents the possible yearly monetary loss from all instances of a specific realized threat. The formula for ALE is simply ALE, Italy, SLE, ARO. Or you can combine it, ALE equals AVEF, ARO. After calculating the ALE for various risks, you'd research potential countermeasures or safeguards. And finally, you perform a cost-benefit analysis to see if the safeguard is worth implementing, which we'll talk more about.
Can you run through a quick example with numbers?
Sure. Let's use the example from the guide. Say the SLE of a particular asset being compromised is $90,000. If the ARO for a specific threat, like a major power loss affecting that asset, is 0.5, meaning it's expected to happen once every 2 years, then the ALE is $90,000 multiplied by 0.5, which equals $45,000 per year. Now consider a different threat for the same asset, a compromised user account. If the ARO for that is 15, happens 15 times a year, then the ALE is $90,000 multiplied by 15, which comes out to a whopping $1,350,000 per year.
Wow, that really puts the potential cost into perspective.
It does. Quantitative analysis is like an accountant meticulously calculating the exact financial impact of every potential disaster on a company's books. It's all about putting a precise dollar figure on the risk. This shifts the conversation from a vague, do we need better security, to a very specific, how much am I willing to invest today to potentially save $1.3 million annually from this specific threat? Makes the business case much clearer.
That's incredibly precise, putting actual numbers to potential losses. So we have these two distinct approaches. Qualitative, which is more subjective and faster, and quantitative, which is mathematical and financial. What are the key differences summarized, and is one generally better than the other?
Well, neither method is inherently better across the board. They really serve different purposes and have different strengths and weaknesses. Table 2.1 in the guide lays this out nicely. Quantitative analysis, as we saw, relies heavily on math functions, provides concrete cost-benefit analysis, uses objective data where possible, though estimation is still often needed for things like ARO, and its results are in dollar figures. It requires more data and can be more time-consuming and complex. Qualitative analysis, on the other hand, doesn't use complex math. It relies more on estimation, expert opinion, and subjective judgment. It's faster, requires less detailed information, and its results are typically descriptive rankings or categories, low, medium, high. It's great for quickly prioritizing a large number of risks or dealing with impacts that are hard to quantify, like reputation.
So they complement each other.
Exactly. Quantitative provides hard financial data, which is excellent for making business cases to upper management, especially when discussing return on investment, or ROI, for security controls. Qualitative is great for initial screening, prioritizing, and addressing intangible risks. In reality, a hybrid approach is often the most practical and effective. You might use qualitative methods to quickly identify and rank the most significant risks and then apply more rigorous quantitative analysis to those top risks where financial justification is needed for investing in countermeasures. This gives organizations a balanced view of their security concerns, combining breadth and depth.
Okay, that hybrid approach makes a lot of sense.
Yeah?
So once organizations identify and assess these risks using qualitative, quantitative, or both methods, what are their actual options for dealing with them? What are their risk responses?
Right. After assessment comes the response. Once risks are identified and assessed, management has several strategic options for how to treat each identified risk. The first and probably most common response is mitigation, which is also called risk reduction. This involves implementing safeguards or countermeasures to reduce either the likelihood or the impact of a specific risk. Examples are everywhere: deploying firewalls, encrypting sensitive data, patching software vulnerabilities, implementing stronger authentication. You're actively taking steps to make the risk less severe or less likely to occur.
Okay, so fixing the problem or making it smaller, what else?
Next, there's assignment or transfer. This means shifting the responsibility and often the financial consequences of the risk to another entity. Cybersecurity insurance, which we'll discuss more in a moment, is a perfect example of risk transfer. Outsourcing certain functions, as we covered earlier, can also be a form of risk transfer. You're not eliminating the risk itself, but someone else is now contractually obligated to handle some or all of its consequences.
So making it someone else's problem, essentially.
Well, sharing the burden, let's say. Then there's deterrence. This involves implementing controls specifically designed to discourage potential attackers or internal policy violators. This could be visible security guards, prominent warning banners on login screens, security cameras, or even just the stated threat of audits or legal action. The goal is to make the potential consequences of an attack or a violation so unattractive that the threat agent decides it's not worth the risk to them. Another option is avoidance. This is about choosing alternate options or activities that inherently have less associated risk. For example, if operating a data center in a known hurricane-prone area poses too much risk, an organization might decide to avoid that risk by moving its operations to a less risky geographic location. Or if a proposed new business venture carries an unacceptably high level of cybersecurity risk, the business leader might simply decide to terminate the project altogether, avoiding the risk entirely.
So don't do the risky thing.
Pretty much. Finally, there's acceptance. This is when an organization acknowledges the risk and its potential consequences and deliberately chooses to do nothing further to mitigate it. This isn't done lightly. It's typically decided when the cost-benefit analysis shows that implementing any available countermeasures would actually cost more than the potential loss from the risk itself. It must be a conscious, informed, and documented decision by senior management, explicitly accepting the potential consequences if the risk materializes. A related but completely unacceptable response is to reject or simply ignore the risk. This typically indicates negligence and can lead to significant legal liability if something goes wrong. You can't just pretend it doesn't exist.
That's a critical distinction between acceptance and rejection.
Absolutely. To use an analogy again, think of that leaky roof on your house. Mitigation would be patching the leak. Transfer would be buying homeowner's insurance that covers water damage. Deterrence could be putting up a prominent "Beware of Attack Dog" sign to discourage burglars who might cause damage trying to get in, even if you don't have a dog. Avoidance would be deciding not to buy the house with the leaky roof in the first place, or maybe moving to a new house in a completely dry climate. And acceptance would be deciding the leak is tiny, the repair's expensive, so you just put a bucket under it and live with it, fully aware of the potential water damage. Rejecting or ignoring it would be letting it flood without even bothering with the bucket.
That's a great spectrum of responses covering all the bases. You mentioned cybersecurity insurance as a key form of risk transfer. Can you elaborate a bit more on how it specifically plays a role in risk management and what kind of coverage it typically provides?
Definitely.
Cybersecurity insurance has become an increasingly essential component of an organization's overall risk management strategy, especially given the, well, escalating threat landscape of cyber attacks we see today. It's basically a type of insurance policy specifically designed to provide coverage and financial protection to organizations, and sometimes individuals, in the event of cyber-related incidents, data breaches, or cyber attacks. It doesn't prevent an attack, let's be clear, but it helps mitigate the often crippling financial and legal consequences that follow. Its real value lies in covering a pretty wide range of potential losses. This can include things like data breach response costs, think notifying affected individuals, setting up call centers, providing credit monitoring services. It often covers financial loss protection from things like fraudulent wire transfers or extortion payments, like paying a ransom in a ransomware attack, though policies vary on this. It also typically covers legal liabilities stemming from incidents, like the cost of defending lawsuits or paying regulatory fines under laws like GDPR or CCPA. Some policies even include coverage for reputation management expenses, hiring a PR firm to help rebuild trust after a public breach.
That's broader than I might have thought.
It can be. Many policies also cover business interruption losses due to system downtime caused by an attack. They might provide access to, or cover the costs of, forensic services to investigate the breach and incident response support to contain and remediate it. It may also extend to third-party liability, covering damages if your vendors, partners, or customers are negatively affected by an incident originating from your systems. So, using our analogy from before, cybersecurity insurance is like comprehensive car insurance, but for your digital assets and operations. It doesn't stop the accident, the cyber attack, from happening, but it helps cover the potentially huge repair costs, legal fees if you get sued, provides a rental car in the form of business interruption coverage while your systems are down, and can even cover other related losses. It's really become a crucial financial safety net in today's digital world for many organizations.
That sounds like an incredibly important safety net, especially with recovery costs being so high. But, okay, insurance aside, with all these potential controls and safeguards we've discussed, firewalls, training, policies, how do organizations decide which ones are actually worth the investment? How do they really calculate the cost versus the benefit of specific security controls?
That's a fundamental question, and it brings us back to the quantitative risk assessment process, particularly the financial calculations we touched on. The value of a safeguard isn't just its inherent technical security benefit. It's also its potential to reduce financial losses and the overall benefit it provides to the organization compared to its cost. When evaluating a potential safeguard, you absolutely need to determine if its cost is reasonable compared to the asset's value it's protecting, and critically, if its benefit, the reduction in risk, outweighs the cost of implementing and maintaining it. To do this calculation, we first need to figure out the annual cost of the safeguard, which we abbreviate as ACS. This isn't just the initial purchase price. It needs to encompass the total yearly cost of deploying and maintaining that safeguard. This includes purchase, implementation labor, operational costs, ongoing maintenance, repairs, maybe software licenses, training users, testing, and even potential impacts on productivity, positive or negative. It's the total cost of ownership, annualized.
Okay, so you have the yearly cost of the control, ACS. How does that fit into the benefit calculation?
Right. The cost-benefit calculation is then typically expressed by a specific formula we mentioned briefly earlier, pre-safeguard ALE, post-safeguard ALE, annual cost of the safeguard, ACS. Or, more simply, you can write it as ALE1, ALE2, ACS. Here, ALE1 is the annualized loss expectancy before you implement the safeguard. That's your baseline yearly risk cost. ALE2 is the calculated annualized loss expectancy after you hypothetically implement the safeguard. So the difference, ALE1, ALE2, represents the expected reduction in annual loss due to the safeguard that's the benefit. Then you subtract the annual cost of the safeguard, ACS, from that benefit. If the result of this calculation is a positive number, it means the safeguard is financially worthwhile. The monetary benefit, loss reduction, is greater than the cost. If the result is negative, the safeguard isn't financially justifiable from a purely economic standpoint. The cost outweighs the calculated benefit.
Can you give a quick example again?
Sure. Let's go back to our compromised user account risk with an ALE of $1,350,000. That was our ALE1. Suppose we're considering implementing a new multi-factor authentication system as a safeguard. We estimate that this system will reduce the ARO of successful account compromises significantly, bringing the new ALE2 down to, say, $150,000 per year. We also calculate the total annual cost of this new system, ACS, hardware, software, support to be $100,000. So the calculation is $1,350,000 ALE1, $150,000 ALE2, $100,000 ACS. That equals $1,200,000 ALE, $100,000, so it's $1,100,000. Since the result is a large positive number, this safeguard is highly financially worthwhile. It's projected to save the company over $1 million annually, even after accounting for its own cost.
That makes the economic case for security very clear indeed. It's not just spending money, it's potentially saving much more.
Exactly. It's about being pragmatic and ensuring security investments align with business objectives and provide demonstrable value, not just implementing security for security's sake. It helps prioritize spending where it has the biggest impact.
Okay, so beyond the numbers, once a safeguard is deemed worthwhile financially, what are the characteristics of effective security controls in general, and how do they fit into a broader security strategy, like that defense in depth idea?
Right, the financial justification is crucial, but it's not the only factor. Effective security controls share several key characteristics beyond just having a positive ROI. First, as we discussed, their costs should generally be less than the value of the asset they're protecting, and their benefit should outweigh the potential cost of an attack being successful. They must provide a real and identified solution to a known risk or vulnerability, not just be, security theater or something implemented because it's the latest trend. Crucially, the control must be testable and verifiable. You need to be able to confirm it's actually working as intended, not just assume it is. It should provide consistent and uniform protection across all relevant users, systems, and protocols. Ideally, an effective control should have few dependencies on other systems, so its failures doesn't cascade, and require minimal human intervention after initial deployment to reduce the chance of human error messing things up. A really good control should also be tamper-proof, or at least tamper-evident, and ideally it should be designed to override even privileged operators in certain situations to prevent abuse of privileges. Lastly, it should offer fail-safe or fail-secure options. This means it defaults to a secure state, like blocking access in case of failure, rather than failing open, allowing access.
Those are really important design considerations. How does this tie into defense in depth?
Perfectly. This leads us right back to that crucial concept, defense in depth. This isn't specific technology, but a conceptual layered approach to security. The idea is to provide maximum benefit by implementing multiple different security mechanisms in layers. So if one layer fails, another is there to catch the threat. Think of it like an onion, or as the guide shows in Figure 2.4, like concentric circles. At the very center are your assets, the critical data, systems, or processes you want to protect. The innermost layer protecting these assets consists of administrative controls. These are the policies, procedures, standards, guidelines, and management oversight defined by an organization's security policy. Examples include hiring practices, background checks, data classification rules, security awareness and training programs, regular audits, and incident response plans. These are essentially the human-driven rules and guidelines governing behavior in operations.
Okay, the rules layer. What's next?
Outward from that administrative layer, you have logical or technical controls. These are the hardware and software mechanisms used to manage access, enforce policies, and provide protection for IT resources electronically. Examples include authentication methods like passwords, biometrics, multi-factor authentication, encryption for data at rest and in transit, access control lists, ACLs on routers and files, firewalls filtering network traffic, routers directing traffic, and intrusion detection systems, or IDSs, monitoring for malicious activity. These are the digital and programmatic defenses.
And the outermost layer.
And the outermost layer is physical controls. These are the measures used to protect the physical facility, the equipment within it, and other real-world objects from harm or unauthorized access. Examples include security guards, fences, walls, locked doors, man-traps or access control vestibules, alarms, security lighting, environmental controls like fire suppression, and closed-circuit television or CCTV cameras. These are the tangible barriers. Each layer administrative, technical, physical supports and reinforces the others. It makes it much harder for an attacker to breach the entire system because they likely have to get through multiple different types of defenses. Defense in depth is exactly like securing a medieval castle. The administrative controls are the written rules for the guards, the protocols for raising the drawbridge, the chain of command. The logical or technical controls are things like the moats, the drawbridges themselves, maybe tripwires or early warning systems like an IDS. And the physical controls are the towering stone walls, the barred gates, the guards themselves. Each layer adds a distinct form of protection. And if an attacker gets over the wall, physical breach, they still face the guards and rules, administrative, and maybe internal locked doors, technical, physical.
That layered approach makes so much sense. You build resilience. Now, beyond those categories, administrative, technical, physical, What are the different types of controls based on their function or maybe when they act in the security process? The guide mentions several types.
Excellent question, because controls can also be classified by what they do functionally or when they act relative to an unwanted event. Think of these like different specialists on a highly coordinated security team, each with a distinct job function contributing to the overall mission. First, you have your preventative controls. These are like the proactive guards at the gate, deployed specifically to thwart or stop unwanted activity before it occurs. Their goal is prevention. Examples include fences, locks, strong authentication systems, data loss prevention, or DLP, software designed to stop sensitive data from leaving the network, firewalls blocking unauthorized connections, security awareness training, preventing users from clicking bad links, anti-malware software, and intrusion prevention systems, or IPSs, which actively block detected threats.
Okay, they stop bad things from happening. What if something gets through?
That's where detective controls come in. These are deployed to discover or detect unwanted activity after it has already occurred, or sometimes while it's in progress. They act like alarms or investigators, alerting you to an incident. Examples include security guards patrolling, motion detectors, CCTV cameras recording events, audit trails, and system logs that record actions, honeypots, which are decoy systems designed to attract and trap attackers, detecting their methods, and intrusion detection systems, which detect but don't necessarily block threats.
So they find the problem, then what?
Then you need corrective controls. These are like the incident response team or the cleanup crew. They modify the environment to return systems to normal after an incident has been detected. Their goal is to fix the immediate problem. This includes actions like terminating malicious processes, rebooting a compromised system, restoring data from backups, running antivirus scans to remove malware, and applying security patches to fix the vulnerability that was exploited.
And then for bigger problems.
For more significant events, you have recovery controls. These are really an extension of corrective controls, but they focus specifically on restoring resources, capabilities, and functions after a major disruption or disaster has occurred. Their goal is getting back to business. Examples include comprehensive backup and restore strategies, fault-tolerant systems designed to withstand component failures, server clustering for high availability, having alternate processing sites, hot, warm, or cold sites, and a well-rehearsed disaster recovery plan, or DRP.
Okay, prevent, detect, correct, recover. Are there others?
Yes, a few more important types. Deterrent controls are deployed specifically to discourage individuals from attempting security policy violations in the first place. They aim to influence behavior by highlighting consequences. Examples include stating clear security policies and penalties, visible locks and security cameras, warning banners on login screens, and even security awareness training can act as a deterrent. Then there are directive controls. These are designed to direct, confine, or control the actions of subjects to force or encourage compliance with security policies. They essentially tell people what they must do. Examples include the security policies themselves, posted notifications, mandatory vacation policies, exit signs, monitoring, and supervision. Finally, we have compensating controls. These are like the backup plan or the alternative solution. They provide an alternative measure of protection when a primary control is deemed impractical, too expensive, or simply cannot be implemented for some reason. They provide a similar level of security through a different means. For instance, if strong encryption isn't feasible for a legacy system, perhaps strict access controls and monitoring could serve as a compensating control. Or, as the guide mentions, a robust fire suppression system might compensate for not being able to fully fireproof a building, but it necessitates having a good DRP and alternate site as well. Each of these control types, preventive, detective, corrective, recovery, deterrent, directive, and compensating, plays a distinct yet interconnected role in building that layered, resilient security posture we talked about with defense in depth.
That's a fantastic way to categorize them based on their function. So once all these carefully chosen controls are in place, layered effectively, how do organizations actually know they're working as intended? And how do they ensure they're continuously improving their security posture over time? It can't just be set and forget.
Absolutely not. Set and forget is a recipe for disaster in security. That brings us to the crucial processes of security control assessment, or SCA, and ongoing monitoring. An SCA is the formal evaluation of a security infrastructure's individual mechanisms, your firewalls, your access controls, your training programs, against a defined baseline or reliability expectation. It's about systematically verifying that the controls you've implemented are not only present, but are actually operating effectively and meeting their objectives. An SCA can be performed independently, maybe by an internal audit team or a third party, or it can be integrated as part of a larger security evaluation, such as a penetration test, a vulnerability assessment, or a formal audit. The National Institute of Standards and Technology, or NIST, Special Publication, or SP 853 Revision 5, provides really extensive guidance on assessing the effectiveness of hundreds of different security controls. It's a key reference.
So, formal testing. What about day-to-day?
Exactly. Beyond those periodic formal assessments, monitoring and measurement need to be continuous, ongoing activities. You're constantly looking for benefits and effectiveness indicators, some of which might not be easily quantified initially, but become clearer over time. Things like tracking incident rates, help desk calls related to security issues, user compliance checks. The value of security controls actually tends to increase over time with continuous improvement and tuning, which is how organizations justify the ongoing expense of maintenance, subscriptions, and personnel. Security isn't a one-time purchase, it's an ongoing operational cost and effort.
And presumably you need to report on how things are going. How do organizations communicate these security findings, the risks, the control effectiveness to different people, from executives down to maybe external regulator?
Yes, risk reporting is a absolutely key task in the whole process. It's how organizations communicate their current risk posture, the effectiveness of their controls, and any significant findings to various stakeholders. This serves both internal audiences, like senior executives who need high-level summaries, department heads who need details relevant to their areas, managers and IT staff, and often external audiences as well, such as government regulators, industry bodies, shareholders, business partners, and sometimes even customers, especially after a breach. For internal reporting and tracking, organizations often use a risk register or risk log. This is essentially a living document, maybe a spreadsheet or a database, that inventories all identified risks, their assessment, likelihood impact, the planned response, the owner of the risk, and tracks the progress of mitigation efforts over time. It's a central repository for risk information.
That sounds useful for tracking. What about visually representing risk?
For a more visual representation, especially for management dashboards or presentations, organizations often use a risk matrix or heat map. This is typically a grid, maybe 3 by 3 or 5 by 5, that plots the likelihood or probability of a risk occurring on one axis against its potential impact or damage on the other axis. Each cell in the grid is colored based on the resulting risk level. Your example, green for low, yellow for medium, red for high. It provides a quick, easy-to-understand visual overview of the most critical risks the organization faces, helping to prioritize attention and resources.
So it's not a static picture, but something that evolves as risks change and controls are updated. How do organizations ensure this continuous improvement happens systematically and actually mature their risk management capabilities over time?
Exactly. Security is always changing. New threats emerge, vulnerabilities are discovered, business processes evolve. So continuous improvement is absolutely essential. It needs to be an ongoing process of reviewing, updating, and changing security solutions and risk management practices. It's definitely not a point-in-time metric you achieve once. It's a continuous journey of adaptation and refinement. A mature approach to this is often formalized through an enterprise risk management, or ERM, program. The ERM aims to implement risk management consistently across the entire organization, integrating it into strategic planning and decision-making rather than having it siloed within IT or security departments. It assesses key indicators and activities to ensure a mature, sustainable, and repeatable risk management process.
How do you measure that maturity? Is there a scale?
Yes, there is. To measure this maturity level, organizations often look to a risk maturity model, or RMM. This concept is quite similar to the capability maturity model, or CMM, which is widely used in software development to assess process maturity. The RMM typically outlines different levels of risk management maturity. Level 1 is ad hoc. This is the starting point, often chaotic and unorganized. Risk management, if it happens at all, is informal, reactive, and inconsistent across the organization. Level 2 is preliminary. Here, there are some loose attempts at risk management. Different departments might be performing risk assessments, but often uniquely, without a centralized approach or common framework. There's awareness, but limited coordination. Level 3 is defined. At this level, a common or standardized risk framework, like one of the NIST or ISO frameworks we'll discuss, is adopted and documented organization-wide. Processes become more consistent and repeatable. Level 4 is integrated. Risk management operations are now integrated into core business processes and decision-making. Metrics are used systematically to gather effectiveness data, and risk is actively considered as an element in business strategy planning. Level 5 is optimized. This is the highest level of maturity. The focus shifts from just reacting to external threats and managing existing risks to proactively seeking ways to achieve strategic objectives through risk management. There's a culture of continuous improvement, strategic planning based on risk appetite, and constant refinement of processes.
That's a great analogy for growth and maturity, like going from barely exercising to being an elite athlete.
Exactly. Think of the RMM as a company's fitness journey. Ad hoc is being completely out of shape, with no consistent exercise routine. Preliminary is trying a few random exercises here and there without a real plan. Defined as having a consistent workout plan adopted by everyone in the household. Integrated is making fitness part of the daily routine, intrinsically linked to overall health goals. Optimized is being like an Olympic athlete, constantly refining performance based on data, proactively seeking new training methods, and strategically planning for peak performance.
That's a fantastic way to visualize the progression. Now, what about the specific risks associated with older, outdated systems? Many organizations still rely on legacy technology. This legacy risk seems like it could be a significant and often overlooked problem.
It absolutely can be, and often is. Legacy risk specifically refers to the security risks posed by legacy devices, software, or systems that are no longer fully supported by their vendor or manufacturer. This usually involves two key terms you need to know: end of life, or EOL, and end of service life, or EOSL. EOL is typically the date when a manufacturer stops producing or selling a particular product. However, they might still offer support, like patches or updates, for a period after the EOL date. EOSL, on the other hand, is the critical date. This is when the vendor completely stops providing any updates, patches, or technical support for a product. It's officially unsupported.
And that's where the real danger lies.
Precisely. The risk associated with using unpatched and unsupported EOSL systems is incredibly high. Why? Because new vulnerabilities are constantly being discovered by researchers and attackers after the EOSL date. But without vendor support, there are no official patches or fixes released to address these new vulnerabilities. This makes these legacy systems incredibly attractive targets for exploitation. Attackers know they're likely vulnerable and won't be fixed. Organizations simply must prioritize migrating away from EOSL systems as quickly as possible, or implement significant compensating controls if migration isn't immediately feasible. A very clear and current example mentioned in the guide is Windows 10. Microsoft has announced its EOSL date is October 14, 2025. After that date, they will no longer provide security updates for most versions. Any organization still running unpatched Windows 10 systems after that date will be highly vulnerable to any new exploits discovered. Legacy risk is very much like trying to drive a very old classic car daily that the manufacturer stopped making parts for or servicing decades ago. It might still look cool and run, but if something breaks, you're completely on your own to find rare parts or custom fabricate a fix. And more importantly, it lacks all the modern safety features, like airbags or anti-lock brakes, and is inherently less safe and reliable than a modern vehicle. You wouldn't want it as your primary transportation in heavy traffic.
That's a stark reminder of the importance of keeping systems current and supported. It sounds like managing all this risk personnel technical legacy is a massive undertaking. Are there any established recipes or standardized guidelines, frameworks that organizations can follow to manage all this complexity effectively?
Yes, definitely. Trying to invent a risk management process from scratch would be incredibly difficult and likely flawed. Thankfully, there are well-established risk frameworks. These provide a structured approach, methodologies, and best practices like a proven recipe or blueprint for how risk should be systematically assessed, resolved, responded to, and monitored over time. The key insight here, though, is that choosing a framework isn't just about picking one off the shelf. It's about selecting the one that aligns best with your specific organizational culture, your industry, your compliance requirements like government regulations or industry standards, and your existing level of risk management maturity. Remember the RMM levels. A very prominent one, especially in the U.S. federal government space, but also widely adopted in the private sector, is the NIST Risk Management Framework, or RMF. It's a comprehensive and detailed guideline for managing security and privacy risk within information systems and across organizations. The RMF involves a cyclical process with 7 main phases, often depicted visually as a hexagon or cycle, like in Figure 2.5 of the guide. It starts with prepare. This is the essential groundwork, getting the organization ready for risk management at all levels. Then it moves into a cycle. Categorize the information system based on its criticality and data sensitivity. Select an initial baseline of security controls based on that categorization. Implement those selected controls. Assess the controls rigorously to determine if they are implemented correctly and producing the desired outcome. Authorize the system for operation based on the assessment findings and acceptance of residual risk by senior management. And finally, monitor the controls continuously over time, making adjustments as needed. It's a highly structured and prescriptive framework, often mandated for federal agencies, making it a compliance necessity for many.
Okay, so NIST RMF is a big one, especially for government. What else is out there?
Another key framework, also from NIST, which has gained enormous traction globally, is the Cybersecurity Framework, or CSF. The latest version, CSF 2.0, was released in early 2024. The CSF is generally seen as less rigid and more adaptable than the RMF. It's structured around 6 core functions: identify, understand your assets, risks, threats; protect, implement safeguards; detect, identify intrusions; respond, take action during an incident; recover, restore normal operations; and the newly added govern function, establish and maintain the overall cybersecurity risk management strategy and oversight. The CSF is less of a strict checklist and more of a common language and set of best practices for managing cybersecurity risk. It emphasizes continuous improvement and provides a flexible approach that organizations of all sizes and sectors can use to assess, develop, and enhance their cybersecurity posture. It's very popular because it helps facilitate communication about risk between technical staff and business leaders.
So RMF and CSS from NIST, any major international ones?
Absolutely. Globally, the International Organization for Standardization, or ISO, and the International Electrotechnical Commission, or IEC, are dominant. Their ISO AES 27000 series provides international standards for information security management systems, ISMS, with ISO 27001 being the main certification standard and ISO 27005 focusing specifically on information security risk management. Additionally, the ISO 31000 standard provides general principles and guidelines for risk management applicable to any type of risk, not just information security. These are often preferred by multinational corporations or organizations operating heavily outside the U.S. Then there's Control Objectives for Information and Related Technology, or COBIT, developed by ISACA. COBIT is a widely respected framework specifically for IT governance and management, helping organizations align IT goals with business objectives and manage IT-related risks effectively. Others mentioned in the guide include Sherwood Applied Business Security Architecture, or SABSA, which focuses on building security architecture aligned with business needs, the Payment Card Industry Data Security Standard, or PCI DSS, which is mandatory for any organization handling credit card data, Committee of Sponsoring Organizations, COSO, Framework for Enterprise Risk Management, ISACA's Risk IT Framework, the Operationally Critical Threat, Asset and Vulnerability Evaluation, or OCTAVE method, the Factor Analysis of Information Risk, or FAIR, Model for Quantitative Risk Analysis, and Threat Assessment and Remediation Analysis, or TARA. Each framework has its own focus and strengths. They all essentially provide a structured way to think about and manage risk. Much like different architectural blueprints provide different valid ways to design and build a secure house, depending on your specific needs and location.
That's a great overview of the frameworks that guide the overall risk management process. Now let's shift our focus somewhat to a specific and incredibly pervasive threat that targets that human element we keep coming back to. Social engineering. What exactly is social engineering, and why is it so disturbingly effective?
Social engineering is a fascinating and frankly quite dangerous form of attack, precisely because it exploits human nature, psychology, and behavior, rather than technical vulnerabilities in hardware or software. Its two primary forms are, essentially, 1, convincing someone to perform an operation they shouldn't, like transferring money or installing malware, or 2, convincing someone to reveal confidential information they shouldn't, like passwords, account numbers, or internal procedures. It's so effective precisely because humans, as we said at the start, are often the weakest element in the security chain. No matter how strong your firewalls, your encryption, your physical security might be, if a person inside can be tricked into bypassing those controls or giving away the keys, then all that technology becomes effectively useless in that instance. Social engineers prey on inherent human traits: trust, helpfulness, politeness, curiosity, fear, greed, respect for authority, and sometimes just our tendency to be busy or distracted and take shortcuts.
So they play on our basic instincts.
Exactly. Think of it like being a con artist, but specifically for cybersecurity. Instead of trying to technically pick a lock or break a code, you convince someone with legitimate access to just open the door for you. You do this by pretending to be someone you're not, like IT support, a new employee, a delivery person, by creating a believable story or pretext, or by manipulating their emotions, creating urgency, fear, or sympathy. You're not breaking into the system technically. You're getting someone on the inside to effectively give you the keys or perform the malicious action for you. It's psychological manipulation applied to security.
That's chillingly effective when you put it like that. Can you give us some common scenarios or specific examples of social engineering in action that people might encounter?
Certainly. The guide lists several classic examples. A very common one is a fake website claiming to offer free access to something desirable, like premium software or movie streaming, but requiring you to alter your browser's security settings or install a special viewer, which is actually malware. Another frequent tactic is the help desk impersonation call. An attacker calls an employee, pretending to be from the internal IT help desk, maybe claiming there's a problem with the employee's account or computer, and asks for their password to fix it. Or they might guide the user to a malicious website to update their software.
People actually fall for that.
Unfortunately, yes, especially if the attacker sounds convincing and creates a sense of urgency. Another scenario is the fake repair technician. Someone shows up at the office, maybe wearing a plausible-looking uniform, holding a clipboard, claiming they need access to a server room or even a specific computer to perform urgent maintenance or fix a supposed malfunction. People often grant access out of politeness, assumption of legitimacy, or a desire to be helpful and not impede important work. Internal impersonation happens too. A coworker, or someone pretending to be one, might ask for help or assistance accessing sensitive information they supposedly need urgently but can't get to themselves, playing on collegiality. Even online forums aren't safe. Attackers might pose questions designed to subtly elicit information commonly used for password reset security questions, like your mother's maiden name or your first pet's name, gathering data for future attacks. These illustrate how attackers exploit trust, authority, urgency, and our willingness to help.
So, given how clever and varied these attacks can be, what are the most important methods or strategies to protect ourselves and our organizations against social engineering? It seems tough to defend against psychological manipulation.
It is challenging, but definitely not impossible. The most important defense against social engineering is really a combination of a healthy dose of skepticism, maybe even paranoia, coupled with robust, ongoing training and awareness. First and foremost, you have to train personnel regularly to recognize the common signs and tactics of social engineering attacks. Show them examples of phishing emails, explain the common pretexts used in phishing calls, teach them about tailgating risks. Awareness is the first line of defense. Implement strong authentication procedures for phone activities, especially for sensitive requests like password resets or data access. Help desk staff should have ways to verify a caller's identity beyond just, say, their name or employee ID. A strict rule should be, never communicate restricted or sensitive information over the phone or via plain text email unless the recipient's identity and authorization are absolutely verified through a separate, secure channel. Always verify service calls independently. If a technician shows up unexpectedly, don't just let them in. Call their company using a known, verified phone number, not one they provide, to confirm they are scheduled and legitimate before granting any access.
Trust but verify, basically.
Exactly. And crucially, never follow instructions in an unexpected email without independent verification from at least one, preferably two, independent and trusted sources, especially if it involves clicking links, downloading attachments, changing settings, or transferring funds. If an email from your CEO asks you to wire money urgently, pick up the phone and call the CEO or CFO directly, using a known number, to confirm. Always be cautious when dealing with any unknown or unverified requests, especially those involving urgency, secrecy, or appeals to authority or emotion. And finally, foster a culture where employees feel safe and encouraged to report suspicious activity immediately to the security team, without fear of ridicule or blame. If something feels off, it probably is. This collective vigilance, where everyone is looking out for these tricks, is arguably the strongest shield against social engineering.
Those are excellent practical tips. Beyond the specific scenarios, social engineers often leverage certain well-understood psychological principles to trick people more effectively. Can you walk us through some of the core social engineering principles the guide mentions? It's like understanding the attacker's playbook.
Absolutely. Understanding these principles helps you recognize why these tactics work and spot them more easily. They're the psychological levers that social engineers pull, and they're highly effective because they tap into our innate, often subconscious, human tendencies. First, there's authority. People are naturally conditioned to respond to and obey figures of authority, or even just the appearance of authority. An attacker might send an email spoofing the CEO's address using formal language, asking HR to urgently send over sensitive employees' salary data for a confidential review. The insight here isn't just that people obey real authority, but that the perception of authority, even if completely faked, is incredibly potent. This means your security policies need to empower employees to question unusual requests, even if they seem to come from a CEO, without fear of reprisal.
So questioning authority can be a security feature.
In this context, absolutely.
Oh.
A related principle is intimidation. This is often a derivative of authority, where the attacker uses a confident, demanding tone or even overt threats like threatening disciplinary action or job loss to create fear or pressure, pushing the victim to comply quickly without thinking critically. The urgency often plays into this. Next is consensus, or social proof. People tend to look to others for cues on how to behave, especially in uncertain situations. We tend to mimic what others do or what we perceive as common or accepted behavior. An attacker might suggest, oh, everyone in accounting just clicks Enable Content on these spreadsheets, making you less likely to question it yourself. The counterintuitive aspect here is that this desire to conform can actually override your own better judgment or security training.
Following the herd, basically.
Pretty much. Then there's scarcity. This principle works by convincing someone that an object, opportunity, or piece of information is of higher value simply because it's limited, rare, or only available for a short time. Think, only 2 tickets left at this price. Or, this security vulnerability is critical, you must patch now before the exploit is released. This creates a sense of urgency and fear of missing out, FOMO, prompting quick, often unthinking action. The key defense is to recognize when urgency is being artificially manufactured to bypass your critical thinking process. Familiarity or liking is another powerful one. We're naturally more inclined to trust and comply with people we know, like, or feel familiar with. Attackers exploit this by building rapport, maybe through initial seemingly innocuous conversations or by impersonating someone the target trusts. A phishing attack might spoof your doctor's office caller ID, making you much more likely to trust the caller and provide personal information. The surprising fact is how easily our natural inclination to trust can be weaponized.
That seems particularly insidious.
It is, and closely related is trust itself. This is often foundational to more complex social engineering schemes. Attackers might work patiently to develop a relationship with a target, sometimes over weeks or even months, building confidence and lowering their guard. Once they've established that trust, they can more easily convince the target to reveal sensitive information or perform an action that violates security policies. This principle is heavily leveraged in business email compromise, or BEC attacks. In a typical BEC scam, an attacker compromises or spoofs the email account of a high-level executive, like the CEO or CFO, or a trusted vendor. They then send emails, often leveraging authority, I need this done now, urgency, we'll lose the deal if payment isn't sent today, and the established trust in that executive or vendor to trick employees in finance or accounts payable into transferring large sums of money to fraudulent bank accounts controlled by the attacker. BEC is responsible for billions of dollars in losses globally precisely because it effectively combines these psychological principles: authority, urgency, trust, and often a pretext.
It's really incredible and scary how these simple psychological tricks can lead to such massive breaches and financial losses. You mentioned eliciting information as a social engineering tactic earlier. What exactly does that involve? And you also mentioned prepending. Can you clarify those?
Sure, eliciting information is simply the activity of gathering or collecting information, often sensitive or non-public, from systems or, more commonly in social engineering, directly from people. It's a key part of the reconnaissance phase for many attacks. Social engineers often use a pretext to facilitate the solicitation. A pretext is essentially a fabricated scenario or a false statement crafted specifically to sound believable and justify the request for information. For example, pretending to be a new employee needing help navigating internal systems, or a researcher conducting a survey. Prepending is a specific technique sometimes used to help establish that pretext, particularly in email or messaging. It involves adding a term or phrase to the beginning of a message subject line or body, like putting RE or FW in the subject line, even if it's the first email in a chain. This makes the message appear as if it's a reply or forward related to a previous legitimate conversation, increasing the chance the recipient will trust it and open it or comply with its request. It's a simple trick to lend false legitimacy.
Okay, that makes sense. Now, what about phishing? That's probably the social engineering term most people have heard. What specifically is it, and how can we best defend against it?
Yes, phishing is arguably the most widespread and well-known form of social engineering attack today. At its core, phishing aims to steal credentials, like usernames and passwords, identity information, like social security numbers or credit card details, or install malware on a target system. It can be waged in numerous ways, but most commonly uses deceptive emails, text messages, that's smishing, phone calls, phishing, or fake websites designed to look like legitimate ones, for example, a fake bank login page. Phishing emails might contain malicious links that, when clicked, lead the user to these fake login pages, or to sites that exploit browser vulnerabilities to install malware automatically. This is known as a drive-by download. They might also contain malicious attachments disguised as invoices, reports, or other seemingly harmless documents, which unleash malware when opened.
So how do we defend against something so common?
Defending against phishing requires constant vigilance and adherence to best practices. Be inherently suspicious of unexpected email messages, especially from unknown senders or even known senders if the content seems unusual or out of character. Never open unexpected attachments, especially from sources you don't recognize or weren't expecting. Never share sensitive information via email. Legitimate organizations will rarely ask for passwords or full account numbers via email. Avoid clicking unknown links in emails or messages. If you need to visit a website like your bank, type the known correct URL directly into your browser instead of clicking a link in an email. Hovering over links before clicking can often reveal if the underlying URL is different from what's displayed. If something seems off or suspicious about a message, verify the information independently. For example, call the supposed sender using a phone number you know is legitimate, not one from the suspicious email, to confirm the request. An organization should conduct regular phishing simulations. These are controlled, fake phishing campaigns sent to employees to test their awareness and train them to recognize and resist real attacks. They are very effective at improving resilience.
Smishing and vishing, are they just phishing using different methods?
Essentially, yes. They leverage the same principles but use different communication channels. Smishing is phishing conducted via short message service, or SMS basically, text messages on your phone. Examples include texts asking you to click a link to claim a prize, verify account details, or warning about a delivery issue, often with a malicious link. They might also ask for personal information via reply, engage you in a pretext conversation, or even try to trigger unauthorized charges, cramming. Vishing is phishing conducted over voice channels, typically via telephone using Voice over Internet Protocol or VoIP technology. This is sometimes also called spam over Internet telephony or SPIT. Phishing attacks often involve attackers calling targets, perhaps impersonating a bank, a government agency like the IRS, or tech support. They frequently use caller ID spoofing to make the call appear legitimate, making it harder to detect the scam. The goal is the same: trick the victim into revealing sensitive information or performing an action like granting remote access to their computer.
And what about spear phishing and whaling? How are they different?
These are more targeted and often more dangerous forms of phishing. Spear phishing isn't a broad, generic attack sent to thousands. Instead, it's highly targeted, crafted specifically for a particular individual, organization, or group. Attackers often conduct prior reconnaissance, using information gleaned from social media profiles like LinkedIn, company websites, or previous data breaches to make the spear phishing email incredibly personalized and believable. It might reference specific projects, colleagues, or recent events to build credibility. Business email compromise, BEC, and CEO fraud, CEO spoofing are common types of spear phishing attacks focused on financial deception, as we discussed earlier. Defenses against spear phishing often require more than just general awareness. They need specific training and clear internal procedures for verifying unusual or high-risk requests, especially those involving financial transactions or sensitive data access. Requesting clarification or confirmation through a separate communication channel is key. Whaling is an even more specific form of spear phishing. It exclusively targets high-value individuals within an organization, the big fish, or whales. This typically means C-level executives like the Chief Executive Officer, CEO, Chief Financial Officer, CFO, or other senior leaders who have high levels of authority and access. Because the potential payoff from compromising such an individual is huge, attackers often invest significant effort in crafting highly sophisticated and convincing whaling attacks.
So it gets progressively more targeted. What about just plain old spam? Is it still a major threat?
Yes, spam, defined simply as undesired or unsolicited email, is still a massive problem. While much of it is just annoying advertising, a significant portion contains malicious content like links to phishing sites, malware attachments, especially ransomware, or scams. Even non-malicious spam wastes huge amounts of network bandwidth, storage space, and user productivity dealing with it. Countermeasures against spam are essential. These include robust email filters at the gateway and endpoint, specialized anti-spam software, and importantly, implementing email authentication standards like Sender Policy Framework, or SPF, Domain Keys Identified Mail, or DKIM, and Domain-Based Message Authentication Reporting and Conformance, or DMARC. These technical standards help receiving mail servers verify that incoming email is actually from the domain it claims to be from, significantly reducing the effectiveness of email spoofing where attackers fake the sender's address.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of digital and communication-based social engineering. What about some of the more old school but still apparently effective tactics that involve physical presence or observation? Things like shoulder surfing.
Absolutely. Some of the most basic yet surprisingly effective social engineering attacks rely on exploiting human behavior and lack of awareness in the physical world.
Hmm.
They haven't gone away just because we have computers. Shoulder surfing is exactly what it sounds like. Someone covertly looks over your shoulder to view sensitive information as you type it or view it on a screen. This could be capturing your PIN at an ATM or point-of-sale terminal, watching you type your password at your desk, or seeing confidential data displayed on your monitor. The simple defense is situational awareness, being mindful of who's around you, and using privacy screen filters on laptops and monitors, especially in public or open-plan offices.
Makes sense. What about getting into places they shouldn't be?
Right, that falls under impersonation or masquerading, which is the broader act of taking on the identity of someone else, either physically, like pretending to be a repair person or employee, or online, like using a fake profile. This often enables physical access attacks like tailgating or piggybacking. Tailgating is when an unauthorized person gains access to a secure facility simply by following closely behind an authorized person who is just badged in before the door closes. Piggybacking is similar, but involves actively tricking an authorized person into holding the door open for them. Hey, can you hold the door? My hands are full.
Ah.
Both bypass physical access controls. Defenses here include vigilant security staff, turnstiles, and especially access control vestibules or man-traps, which only allow one person through at a time per authentication. Security cameras also help detect and deter this.
Okay, what else happens in the physical world?
Well, there's baiting. This tactic uses physical media, most commonly malware-loaded USB sticks or CDs, which are intentionally left in public places where victims might find them, like parking lots, restrooms, lobbies. The attacker relies on human curiosity. Someone picks up the lost USB drive, plugs it into the computer to see what's on it, and unknowingly infects their system with malware or gets directed to a phishing site. The defense is simple. Don't plug unknown media into your computer. Then there's the classic dumpster diving. This involves attackers literally sifting through an organization's discarded trash looking for potentially sensitive information. You'd be amazed what people throw away: old calendars, meeting notes, internal phone directories, system manuals, drafts of documents, printouts, and even sticky notes with passwords written on them. The defense is equally classic. Implement and enforce strict policies for shredding documents and properly disposing of all sensitive physical media.
People still write passwords on sticky notes.
Sadly, yes. We also have invoice scams, which we mentioned in the context of BEC, but they can also be physical. An attacker might send a fake invoice through the mail or via fax, hoping it gets processed and paid by the accounts payable department. These often impersonate legitimate vendors and rely on busy staff not carefully verifying the details. Strong internal financial controls and verification procedures are crucial defenses. And then there's the concept of a hoax. This is often an email or web message designed to cause problems or reduce IT security, not necessarily by installing malware directly, but by tricking users into taking harmful actions themselves. Classic examples include warnings about non-existent viruses that instruct users to delete legitimate system files, or chain emails spreading false alarms that waste time and resources. These prey on a user's lack of technical knowledge and their desire to be helpful or safe. All these physical and psychological manipulations, shoulder surfing, impersonation, baiting, dumpster diving, often feed into broader criminal goals like identity fraud or identity theft. This is the act of stealing someone's identity, usually by obtaining their personally identifiable information, or PII, like name, date of birth, social security number, bank details, through social engineering or other means, in order to achieve economic gain, like opening fraudulent accounts or filing fake tax returns. This often involves credential hijacking, stealing login details, and spoofing identities.
Okay, switching back to the digital side slightly. What about things like typo-squatting or clickjacking? How do those work?
Good ones. These are more technical forms of deception targeting users online. Typo-squatting relies on users making common typographical errors when entering a domain name or IP address into their browser. Attackers register domain names that are slight misspellings or variations of popular legitimate sites, for example, google.com instead of google.com. When a user mistypes the address, they are unknowingly redirected to the attacker's malicious site, which might host malware, phishing forms, or unwanted ads. URL hijacking is a broader term that can encompass typo-squatting, but also includes other techniques where an attacker redirects the user's intended navigation. For example, they might compromise a legitimate website and change the destination of links on the page, or use malicious ads that redirect users when clicked.
The goal is always to send the user to an alternate, often malicious target without them realizing it immediately. Clickjacking is even more deceptive. It's a technique where an attacker tricks a user into clicking on something different from what the user perceives they are clicking on. They do this by overlaying invisible or hidden elements, like buttons or links, on top of a legitimate-looking web page. So a user might think they're clicking a button to watch a video or close an ad, but they're actually clicking an invisible button underneath that might, for example, initiate a social media like, download malware, or authorize a payment. It hijacks the user's click. This is sometimes related to adversary in the middle, AM, previously known as man-in-the-middle, MIN attacks, where an attacker intercepts and potentially alters communication between two parties.
That's a fascinating and worrying look at the sheer breadth of these social engineering and deception tactics, both physical and digital. Let's broaden the scope again slightly. You mentioned influence campaigns earlier. This sounds like it goes beyond just individual attacks or tricking single users, perhaps operating at a much larger, maybe even national level. Can you expand on that?
Indeed. Influence campaigns represent social engineering operating on a grander, often strategic scale. They are coordinated efforts, frequently undertaken by nation-states, political groups, or large organizations, designed specifically to guide, adjust, manipulate, or change public opinion, beliefs, or behaviors on a large scale. They leverage various forms of false, misleading, or emotionally charged content distributed widely, usually through online platforms. It's important to understand the different types of problematic information used in these campaigns. Disinformation is intentionally false or misleading information that is deliberately created and spread to deceive, harm, or manipulate people, organizations, or governments. The intent is malicious. Misinformation, on the other hand, is information that is inaccurate or misleading, but crucially, it is spread without the specific intent to deceive. It might be due to error, misunderstanding, or repeating something heard elsewhere. Still harmful, but the intent differs. Propaganda is a more systematic effort to spread particular ideas, doctrines, or allegations which may or may not be true specifically to promote a certain political cause, viewpoint, or agenda. It's about persuasion, often using emotional appeals. False information is a broader term for any information that is factually incorrect, whether spread intentionally, disinformation, or unintentionally, misinformation. Fake news is a colloquial term that generally refers to deliberately fabricated news stories, designed to look like legitimate journalism, but created to deceive readers and often spread virally online. A particularly nasty tactic sometimes used in conjunction with influence campaigns is doxing. This is the act of researching and then publicly publishing private or personally identifiable information, PII, about an individual or organization, usually without their consent and with malicious intent, such as harassment, public shaming, or inciting violence against them.
So these campaigns weaponize information itself.
Precisely. And these campaigns are a significant component of modern hybrid warfare. This is a military strategy that blends conventional warfare, like troops and tanks, with unconventional tactics, including cyber warfare, hacking, disrupting infrastructure, psychological warfare, economic pressure, political subversion, and centrally, these large-scale influence campaigns using disinformation and propaganda. Social media platforms, unfortunately, have become incredibly powerful tools and battlegrounds in these campaigns. They allow for the rapid, wide-scale dissemination of false information, the creation of fake personas or groups, the amplification of divisive content, and sometimes the elicitation or disclosure of PII data on a mass scale. For you, the user, the critical takeaway is the importance of media literacy and critical thinking. You need to constantly question the content you encounter online. Is this information accurate? Who produced it? What is their potential motive? Can I verify this through independent, reputable sources? What you read, believe, and share online has real-world consequences, and knowing what content is accurate and who produced it is more vital than ever. What you type or share publicly can absolutely be gathered and used against you or your organization in these broader campaigns.
That's a huge area of concern, moving from individual scams to potentially state-sponsored manipulation. It really highlights again why that human element is so vital, both as a target and as a line of defense in cybersecurity. So to combat all these human-focused threats, social engineering, influence campaigns, and also just the general risk landscape we discussed earlier, what's the blueprint? How do organizations establish and maintain a strong, effective security awareness, education, and training program?
Right, because technology controls alone are never enough, especially against threats targeting human psychology. The successful implementation and ongoing effectiveness of any security solution ultimately requires changes in user behavior. People need to act securely. These behavioral changes are typically mandated and supported by the organization's security policy, but policy alone isn't enough.
You need to actively cultivate that secure behavior. A strong security program designed to achieve this is traditionally built on three distinct but interconnected pillars: awareness, training, and education. Understanding the difference is key. Awareness is the foundational level. Its primary goal is simply to bring security to the forefront of users' minds, making it a recognized and understood entity for everyone in the organization. It's about creating a baseline understanding of security threats and policies, focusing on key issues relevant to everyone, like phishing or password security, and fostering a corporate culture where security is seen as everyone's responsibility. Crucially, awareness efforts need visible support from C-level executives down to be taken seriously. Awareness doesn't necessarily teach you how to perform a specific task securely. It makes you cognizant that security risks exist and are relevant to you.
So just making people mindful of security.
Exactly. Think of awareness like a citywide see something, say something campaign or a public health announcement about washing your hands. It doesn't teach you how to be a police officer or a doctor, but it makes you aware of common dangers or health practices and encourages vigilance and basic good habits. It's about general consciousness. Training, the second pillar, takes it a step further and gets more specific. Its goal is to teach employees how to perform their specific work tasks and duties in compliance with the organization's security policy. Training cultivates the necessary skills and knowledge to follow procedures correctly. Training is typically hosted or mandated by the organization. It's often mandatory for specific job roles or functions, like handling sensitive data, and it should be an ongoing activity, reinforced regularly, not just a one-time onboarding event. It's considered a key administrative security control. Importantly, the effectiveness of training needs to be measured, and the program revised and improved over time based on those measurements. You look for measurable benefits like a reduction in security incidents, less downtime, fewer policy violations, and you often use post-learning testing to confirm comprehension. Training gives you the specific skills for your job. This is like the police academy. It teaches recruits specific skills like how to handle evidence, procedures like arrest protocols, and how to use their tools effectively to perform their tasks safely and follow regulations.
Okay, awareness is broad, training is job-specific skills. What's education?
Finally, education is the third and deepest level. Its goal is a much more detailed and comprehensive endeavor, where students or users aim to learn much more about security than they might strictly need for their current work tasks. Education provides broader context, deeper understanding of underlying principles, and often explores theoretical concepts. Education is often associated with longer-term career paths in security, pursuing certifications like the CISSP itself, getting degrees, or seeking job promotion within the security field. It provides a broad, comprehensive understanding of the why behind security measures, not just the how of performing a task. Education is like getting a university degree in cybersecurity, computer science, or digital forensics. It's broader, deeper theoretical as well as practical, and prepares you for a long-term career and the ability to tackle complex, novel problems in the field, not just follow procedures for a specific current job.
That distinction between awareness, training, and education, broad mindfulness, specific skills, and deep understanding is really helpful for structuring these programs. Now, are there modern, innovative ways to make these programs more effective and engaging, especially given how quickly threats evolve and, let's face it, how dry security training can sometimes be?
Absolutely. Traditional methods like just lectures or reading policy documents often have limited impact. Modern approaches focus heavily on engagement, relevance, and making the learning stick. One technique is to change the target focus periodically. Instead of just generic training for all employees, programs might create tailored modules specifically for customers, clients, specific departments like finance or HR, or the organization as a whole, addressing the unique risks and perspectives of each group. Changing the topic or emphasis regularly is also key, focusing on emerging threats like new social engineering tactics, mobile security risks, cloud security issues, or specific compliance requirements relevant at the time. Using diverse presentation methods makes a huge difference in engagement. This could include a mix of interactive in-person sessions, engaging professionally produced videos, interactive e-learning software, maybe even virtual reality, or VR, simulations for highly realistic threat scenarios, like responding to a physical security breach, off-site workshops, interactive websites with quizzes and challenges, or even recommending relevant books. The guide mentioned Scam Me If You Can by Frank Abagnale as an example for social engineering awareness. Role-playing exercises can be highly effective. Having participants actively practice attacker and defender scenarios related to social engineering or incident response helps them internalize the concepts much better than passive learning.
Putting them in the hot seat. basically.
Kind of, yes, in a safe environment. Organizations are also increasingly leveraging internal security champions. These are individuals, often volunteers from non-security roles within different business units, who are trained and empowered to act as local advocates and resources for security. They help lead the adoption and integration of security concepts within their own work groups, answer peer questions, promote secure practices, and provide feedback to the central security team. They act as trusted peer leaders, making security feel less like an external mandate. Gamification is another powerful and increasingly popular technique. This involves integrating common elements of gameplay like earning points, winning badges, competing on leaderboards, following storylines, solving puzzles into security training modules and awareness campaigns.
Making security fun.
It's exactly. Or at least more engaging. It promotes healthy competition, encourages deeper learning as people strive to improve their scores or rankings, and fosters more consistent engagement with the material. Examples include capture the flag, CTF exercises where teams compete to solve security challenges, simulated phishing platforms that score users on detection rates, interactive computer-based training, or CBT, modules with game mechanics, and role-based training scenarios presented as quests or challenges. Gamification is like turning security training into a fun competitive sport or a compelling video game. Instead of just passively reading a textbook, you're actively playing, earning points, maybe winning small prizes or recognition, which makes you much more invested in learning and actually applying the rules. Finally, micro-training, also known as micro-learning or micro-education, is gaining traction. This approach delivers security knowledge in very short, highly focused, bite-sized learning modules, often designed for delivery via mobile apps or short videos. This caters to modern, shorter attention spans and makes learning more accessible and convenient, allowing employees to consume quick lessons on the go or during brief downtimes.
Those are some great creative ways to keep security training fresh and engaging, moving beyond the boring mandatory slideshow. But how do organizations actually measure if all this effort, the awareness campaigns, the gamified training, the security champions, is actually paying off? How do they evaluate the effectiveness of these programs in a meaningful way?
That evaluation piece is absolutely critical. You can spend a lot of time and money on these programs, but if they aren't actually changing behavior and reducing risk, they're not providing value. Evaluation ensures the investment is worthwhile and guides future improvements. This involves periodic content reviews of all training materials to ensure they're still accurate, relevant, and aligned with current threats and organizational policies. It also means ensuring the overall program strategy aligns clearly with broader business goals and organizational risk management objectives. You need metrics to verify that personnel have actually attended or completed the required awareness and training activities. But more importantly, you need ways to assess whether they understand the concepts and, crucially, whether they are adhering to secure behaviors in their daily work.
How do you measure behavior change? That seems difficult.
It can be, but there are ways. This often involves evaluating data from other security systems. For example, analyzing audit logs to see if policy violations are decreasing over time. Investigating security incidents to determine if they were caused by intentional disregard for policy, coercion, genuine accidents, or perhaps ignorance that indicates a training gap. You can track metrics like phishing simulation click rates over time, hopefully seeing a decrease as training progresses. Monitoring help desk calls related to security issues like password resets, reporting suspicious emails can also provide insights. Conducting periodic knowledge checks or surveys can gauge understanding. Ultimately, it's about linking the training investment directly to observable behavior change and, ideally, a measurable reduction in security infractions, incidents, data breaches, and the associated response and management costs. Organizations want to see an overall return on investment, or ROI, from their security awareness and training programs. Think of it like a coach reviewing game tapes after implementing a new training regimen. They're not just looking at whether the players showed up for practice. Attendance.
They're analyzing their actual performance during the game. Are they making fewer turnovers? Are they executing the plays correctly? Are they communicating better on defense? And ultimately, are they winning more games? It's about measuring the real-world impact on performance and outcomes.
Okay, that's a really thorough exploration of personnel security, risk management, social engineering, and the vital role of awareness and training. Let's try to pull it all together. Let's unpack this. What really stands out to IU from our deep dive today? What are the absolute core themes?
Yeah, it's been a lot of ground covered, hasn't it? If I were to summarize the core themes that really stand out from our deep dive into this chapter, I'd probably highlight 4 key areas. First, the absolutely critical central role of personnel security. We saw how managing the human element is fundamental, starting right from the beginning with robust hiring practices, clear job descriptions, thorough candidate screening, meticulous onboarding procedures, including crucial agreements like NDAs and NCAs, and it continues throughout the employee lifecycle with vigilant ongoing oversight, constantly reinforcing the principle of least privilege, using techniques like mandatory vacations and separation of duties to prevent fraud, and leveraging advanced tools like user and entity behavior analytics, or UEBA, to spot anomalies. And finally, ensuring security through carefully managed offboarding and transfers. It really emphasized that people are key, both risk and asset.
Okay. Personnel security as foundational. What's next?
Second, the comprehensive nature of risk management concepts. We really broke down the language understanding the foundational terminology like asset, threat, vulnerability, risk, and safeguard, and visualizing their relationship with that risk wheel analogy. We explored the importance of risk assessment, comparing the subjective scenario-based qualitative approach with the mathematical, dollar-focused quantitative approach, including those key formulas for SLE, ARO, and ALE. And we covered the various strategic risk responses available to management mitigation, transfer like cybersecurity insurance, avoidance, acceptance, always driven by a careful cost versus benefit analysis for any proposed security controls.
Right, the whole risk management lifecycle.
Exactly. Third, building on controls, we reinforce the layered approach of defense in depth, visualizing security as those concentric circles of administrative, logical, technical, and physical controls. And we categorize the different types of controls based on their function: preventive, detective, corrective, recovery, deterrent, directive, and compensating, understanding how they work together to create resilience. And fourth, we spent significant time on the persistent, human-centric threat of social engineering. We dug into the psychological principles that make it so effective, playing on authority, scarcity, trust, liking, and others. We explored its many insidious forms, from broad phishing, smishing, and vishing campaigns to highly targeted spear phishing and whaling, and even physical tactics like impersonation, baiting, and dumpster diving, plus broader issues like invoice scams and large-scale influence campaigns. The key takeaway there was how these attacks cleverly bypass technology by exploiting our innate human tendencies.
And the defense against that.
Which leads perfectly to the final core theme: the paramount importance of establishing and maintaining robust security awareness, education, and training programs. We saw these as the primary defense against social engineering and a critical component of overall risk mitigation. We discussed the distinct roles of awareness, training, and education, and explored modern methods for continuous improvement and engagement, like gamification, micro-training, and security champions. And crucially, the need to constantly evaluate the effectiveness of these programs to ensure they are genuinely changing behavior and reducing organizational risk. So yeah, if I had to boil it down, it's clear that effective cybersecurity isn't just about the technology. It's profoundly about understanding and managing the people involved, assessing and responding to risks holistically, building layered defenses, and constantly educating and empowering the human element throughout their entire life cycle within an organization.
That's a powerful summary, and it truly reinforces that main takeaway you just hit on. Cybersecurity isn't just about the tech blinking in the server room. It's profoundly about the people interacting with it and managing all the associated risks throughout their journey with an organization. So what does this all mean for you, our listener, as you go about your day? Well, maybe next time you click on a link in an email or get an urgent request over the phone, or even just say yes to letting someone follow you through a secure door. Perhaps you'll pause for a second. You'll be thinking about those hidden principles of social engineering, the potential risks involved, and the many layers of personnel security and controls designed to protect not just the organization's assets, but also you. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into CISSP Chapter 2. It's been a fascinating discussion. Until next time, keep listening, keep learning,